Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Kutsai Kariri. I'm with the IPC unit based in Johannesburg.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Talent, FAO for Security Data Analyst.
Good morning. My name is Simon Mohimbi with the IPC unit, regional IPC trainer.
Good morning, my name is Insurance Focal Point WFP. Thank you.
Good morning. I think most of you know me, Curation, co-chair of the FNSWG and regional advisor for anticipatory action.
Good morning. My name is Godfrey Kapera and I'm with the FuseNet Regional Office, and I'm also co-chair for the FNSWG.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go online and have a quick view of who's online. Colleagues online, anybody would like to introduce themselves? I know I don't like to put you on the spot all the time, but it would be nice to see how many of you are there.
Hello, colleagues. This is Morena Justice Mokotedi. I'm working for IFAD Operations and Program.
Thanks. Yes.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Peter Mohangi. I'm with Plan International. I'm the Global Food Security and Livelihood Specialist based in Uganda. Good to be here.
Thanks, Peter.
Morning.
Good morning.
This is Morning. This is Bulisani Ngube. I'm with the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, STC. I'm based in Harare. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Angela Kafembe. I'm with the FAO Sub-Regional Resilience Hub in Johannesburg.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Eddie Palula. I work for World Vision International. I'm the Regional Disaster Management Advisor for Southern Africa. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Beth Simons. I'm a humanitarian early warning analyst in the early warning analysis team at FCDO based in London. Nice to meet you all.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Tamuka Magadzire. I'm the regional scientist for FuseNet in Southern Africa, based at the SADC Secretariat in Gaborone, Botswana. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamuka. I think we have anyone else? Irene, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Irene. I'm a nutritionist with WFP.
Good morning. This is Pamela Mokhane with FuseNet, Assistant Regional Scientist for Southern Africa.
Thank you. And we have one more colleague who's joined us. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I think I know most of you, but I'm Virginia from WFP LAN at the regional level.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much, colleagues. Let's have a quick look at the agenda. So we are going to start today with the climate outlook. Sipo, do you want to just minimize the Teams window so we can look at the agenda? Thanks. So we're going to start with the climate outlook today, being presented by FuseNet. Tamuka will lead us through that. We're then going to go through the food security and agriculture updates, which is a mix of security analysis from FuseNet, from partner agencies, and from the IPC. We'll also talk a little bit to the latest JEWS crop prospects report, so we can have a look at the countries that are, at risk of having below average harvest this year, and the countries that are also looking quite positive. We'll go to the IPC team, and they will provide us with a quick update on Mozambique. We will then move to UNICEF and WFP, who will provide a nutrition update, FuseNet and WFP again to provide prices and market updates. And then we are opening up the meeting to partners to please contribute if you have any updates on any key issues on the flood response, on other emerging issues, any events that you are having. Please use that agenda item to share the information with us. We will then move to AOB. where we will discuss a little bit about the work plan and some action points for partners, and we will close the meeting. On this note, I now invite Tamuka to take us through the climate update. So Tamuka, the floor is yours.
Tamuka is going to share his own screen.
Okay.
Tamuka, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to share now. Apologies for that, colleagues. I hope you can now see my screen.
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to be taking you through the regional seasonal agroclimatology update for 22-23 season. And so just a kind of outline of what we'll be going through. We're looking at the performance of the season, significant climate events during the 22-23 season, as well as the impacts on agriculture and livelihoods. So this was kind of an offshoot of a presentation that we held together with the Climate Hazard Center. And we noted that already with the Climate Services Center, sorry, at the SADC RVAA meeting last week. And from this, we noted that the forecast was going for mostly normal to above normal rainfall in most parts of the region. This, however, is the outcome that we had in terms of the seasonal performance. Looking at the overall season, we note that if we accumulate the rainfall from October to almost end of March, we had this large area in the west where we had significantly below normal rains. But on the other hand, we had some of these areas where we had above normal rains in the south and some of the eastern areas. So this was primarily due to the tropical cyclones, especially Tropical Cyclone Freddy, which we know caused significant impacts. I won't be talking much about the impacts of the cyclone in this slide, because I think in the next few slides, I know FAO has done some work on that. If we look, however, now at the how we can interpret this rainfall that has happened, we note that especially in the western areas like southern Angola, northern Namibia, and northwestern Botswana, as well as northern Madagascar, the rainfall that they received over this during this season is one of the lowest that has been experienced since 1981. This is based on the CHIRPS archive, which goes back to 1981. So basically, we can say it's for as far back as our rainfall archive stretches. This is one of the driest. I think these red colors here show this is the second driest in these areas. The dark brown is the driest. So we can see that it was really a poor seasonal performance in as far as the rains go, or for over the past. If we now look at this in terms of breaking it down into the first and the second half of the season, we note that actually both halves of the season were quite poor in the areas that we have been focusing on. This is typically associated, the first half of the season is typically associated with the onset of rains and planting season, where we note that, when we have got poor rains, farmers tend to plant less and they tend to plant late, which has both got negative impacts on expected harvests. If we look now to the second half of the season, which goes through to the in this case, this one just goes to the 15th of March. We note that this is when we really had the focus of the dryness, especially in these western areas. So this, first of all, we had poor rains, which led to poor planting. Then we had poor crop development also in these areas, which was associated with the low rains in the times when we expect development of the crop through to the flowering and even the grain filling for the cereals. If we look at this on a month-by-month basis, I think this is when you can pick up some of the events that happened. I think of note, so this is from October 2022, November, December, January, February, March. I think the thing that we notice most, which is most clear, is that first of all, we had this dry spell starting in December in some areas, but I think covering much of the central parts of the region, we had below normal rains in much of this area, covering southeastern Angola, northern Namibia, much of Botswana, and the southern half of Zimbabwe, and going through to even central and southern Mozambique, as well as Eswatini. Moving into February, we noticed that in some of the areas we had above normal rains, and this was associated actually with the tropical cyclones, as well as torrential rains in parts of the South Africa here. But we note that the rainfall, the cyclones, caused significant rainfall in southern and central Mozambique, going through to March here, where we had tropical cyclone Freddy, which then affected central Mozambique and southern Malawi. But what we note also is that in some of the areas we had continuous dryness going through from January through February, and even March was also slightly below normal. And then also looking at some, so if we classify this into some of the significant climate events that we experience that can affect our food security, one of the things that we noted, already made note of this, is the poor onset of rains. This map is showing the onset of rains compared to average conditions. And what we see from these red areas is where the season was at least 4 decades late. What we see actually from an update to this is that in some of the areas, the map was revised to show that, in fact, the rain was so poor that we don't really expect much of this rains to have been sufficient for planting. This is affecting some of the main growing areas, especially in Namibia, that we note. I think most of the cereal growing is done in northern Namibia, and northern Botswana is also one of the higher growing areas. So this is affected in terms of planting, and we can see again here it's associated with the below normal rains that occurred during the October to December period. We also note that this I mentioned this earlier, but just to highlight the severity of the dry conditions in January. This is a percent rainfall for January expressed as a percent of average. And what we note from here is that many of these areas had rainfall which was less than 30% of their long-term average rainfall. When you look at the impacts of this now, we notice that this is now showing the results of a crop water balance model that we ran, and this is particularly focusing on the soil water index. This is the soil water expressed as a percent of the water holding capacity of the soil. But what this map is basically showing is that the soil moisture is estimated to be so low that the crops are likely to be at wilting point in many of the areas which are shown here. So this January, this is at the end of January, after this 30-day dry spell that we saw there. So what we note here is that already we had these impacts of the dry conditions causing wilting. And in fact, colleagues from Zimbabwe, parts of Namibia as well, did note that there had been some wilting, and parts of Zambia as well noted that some wilting, permanent wilting had occurred in some of these areas. This is a map shared by the Minister of Agriculture, a colleague in the Ministry of Agriculture in Zimbabwe, showing the crop conditions in Mwenezi, which is a district in southern Zimbabwe. Although the crop looks green here, this map was taken later during the year after some recovery, and you can see that, you know, although the crop looks green, but in fact much of the flowering has not occurred because of the dryness that occurred, and you can see it's splattered there within some of the dryness, which is showing the impacts. So the crop kind of greened up after the rains returned in February, but because of the impacts of the dry conditions, not much of a yield is expected there. We also had a couple of tropical cyclones, which resulted in flooding, waterlogging, leaching, and the impacts on livestock in the 4 countries mentioned here. I won't go into detail on this because I know that FAO has been collecting this information. So I think there will be some presentations which relate to some of the impacts later in the slide. We also had an extended dry spell. So first of all, I mentioned the January dry spell. And then after that, there were some rains in February. But from late February until late March, we had another dry spell. So even though there was some rains, which caused maybe some hope to return for potential for those crops which had not permanently wilted, but then we're struck again by another significant dry spell, which was actually related to tropical cyclone Freddy, because what these cyclones do typically when they're in the Mozambique Channel or in parts of the Indian Ocean, they tend to draw moisture away from the mainland. And so we have this large area here which was affected by dryness. The map, first of all, focuses on 15 March, up from 21 February to 15 March. That's over 3 weeks. But if we now go through all the way to 25 March, we notice that in some areas, especially parts of Zimbabwe, Botswana, South Africa, and Namibia, the dryness actually extended for more than 5 weeks when we look through to the what we see here. There were a few areas where there was some rains. So this is now showing 16 to 25 March. So the last part of this period through to 25 March, we do note that we did have some rains which came back in some areas. So that helped to reduce some of the impacts, but still overall we did have significant dryness. If we look at the impacts of this in terms of apologies for that. If we look at the impacts of this now on the crop conditions, what we note is that this map is showing the water requirement satisfaction index, which really highlights the impacts of crop water deficits on likely crop production. And what we see is that in a lot of these areas, the ability of the crop to grow was significantly impacted, and so we are likely to have reduced yields in some of these areas as a result of the temporal distribution of rainfall. And we also note again, like I mentioned here, that the rains were so poor that in some of these areas, our model actually revised itself to note that, to suggest that there might not have been enough rainfall for planting. In other areas, though, I think in much of the region, there was actually significant rains, which allowed the crop to develop fully. And in fact, from a tour that we did in South Africa, we noted that in a number of areas, especially some of the main maize growing areas, there was actually good yields production is expected. Looking at the impact now on pastures, we also note that this map is showing the normalized difference vegetation index, which is an index which highlights or shows the vegetation condition as expressed in terms of its greenness, as well as the density of the vegetation. What you note that again, some of those areas where we're below normal rains was impacted in terms of the vegetation conditions, and we're expecting that this is likely to negatively impact on pastures availability for livestock. This has been this is a map or a graph shared by colleagues at the Zambezi River Authority, which is showing the Kariba Dam levels. It was near record lows actually by the time of January, but it has increased somewhat. It's currently just over 20%, but it's still well below what is expected or what is required for sustainable operation of the dam, and what this is having impacts on irrigation and various livelihoods which require or depend on electrical generation in Zambia and Zimbabwe. And then when you look at the overall impact of all the different information that we have available to us, from remote sensing, from field information, this is synthesized in this map, which is the GeoGlam map. My colleague Pam actually leads our FuseNet effort in compiling this the Southern Africa component of this map. And what we notice is that I think many of these areas are noted as they are being under watch because of the negative or the poor rainfall performance which we have experienced in much of the season, both due to droughts and flooding. And then looking ahead, this is my second last slide. This is showing the impacts of the, or rather the forecast for the El Nino Southern Oscillation, which is the going through to October, November, December. And what we're seeing is that by the early estimates from our colleagues at NOAA and Climate Prediction Center, the NOAA Climate Prediction Center do show that we are expecting an El Nino as most likely by the start of the 2023-2024 season. And these are the typical impacts that we can get. We know that much of Southern Africa is typically associated with below normal rainfall during this period when we have got El Nino. So this is what I have to share with you, and I'll be happy to take any questions if there's still time. Over.
Thank you, Tamuka, for that excellent presentation. Let's open the floor for some questions before we move on to the next presentation. I think it was quite eye-opening, especially the maps, the rainfall maps that you showed us, the information on dry spells, quite sobering indeed. Questions for Tamuka? Kudzai?
Thanks, Tamuka. Quite an informative presentation. I have concern with northern Mozambique, Cabo Delgado. We are all concerned with that. And if you look at the assumptions that went into the IPC, I think it was normal to above normal rainfall that they were looking at. And of course, conflict, you realize that it's really going to be a challenge. We also have, you mentioned southwest parts of the region, Angola. If you can go back to your slide where you mentioned the driest in I'm not sure how many years. How does it compare to the previous part one season where we had the hardest drought in 40 years for Angola? And we know they haven't released the IPC report that was done in October. And what does that mean for us going forward? If you can go back to, yes, you said the rainfall is in the west is among the lowest since 1981. How does it compare, Tamuka, with what they had in the previous part one season? Over.
Thanks for that. That's a good question, Kudzai. Thanks for that. I can't pull it off the top of my head, but I do know that southern Angola, I think, has had some recurrent droughts over the past few seasons. I think I can run an analysis and maybe get back to you on that to say that what was the exact impact of the last 2 years in terms of the ranking of that particular season. Yeah, but I do know that a number of these areas have been low rainfall, consecutive below normal rainfall and drought, and I think there's an ongoing drought in southern Angola. Yeah, but let me compile that information so that I'm not speaking from the top of my head and share that with you soon after the meeting. But maybe just to add on to that, I think it's the next logical step then is that given that we've had this recurrent droughts that are occurring, we know that this tends to affect the resilience of these communities through the eroding of their coping capacity. So this is definitely a cause for concern, given that we've had a number of recurrent droughts which are occurring in this area. Over.
Okay. I think Kudzai has one more question.
Sorry, just the last one. As a follow-up, you do monitor dryness and dry spells, and we know this season the region has had quite a lot of flooding. Recently, I think even now, Zambia is facing flooding some areas. Have you done an analysis to see the impact of those flooding of the flooding on the cropping and vegetation?
Yeah, thanks again for another good question, Kudzai. We haven't done a precise analysis to look at the impacts of the flooding, partly because the flooding is related to the hydrological impacts, which requires some somewhat complex modeling. We do have partners at US Geological Survey and NASA who are engaging in this analysis, but it tends to be on a by request basis. The information also, because we need them to overlay precise crop mask, which unfortunately we don't have access to. I know that FAO has been working on some of similar assessments. I think Curetia shared some of this during the SADC RVAA meeting last week, and I would defer to Curetia regarding the analysis that they've done. But what I will do is that I will consult with our colleagues at USGS to ask them for additional analysis that they have access to. Some of them are in the field right now, actually, so might be a bit of a delay in getting back to you on that. Over. Maybe Curetia, you can also add based on your analysis that you have been running.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Kudzai, is that fine?
No, it's fine. Tamuka, looking forward to your response. Thanks.
Thanks, Tamuka, for offering to run that analysis for us. It would be quite interesting, I think, for all partners. Colleagues online, if you have any questions for Tamuka, please feel free to put it in the chat. Are there any more questions for Tamuka from people who are here, members present? No?
Just a quick one. What is the white? I can't read the index from here. The white spaces, what are they?
Tamuka, what do the white spaces mean between the lightish orange and the light blue?
Okay, so the white is showing areas where it's not within those two categories of either very dry or very wet within the ranking. So it's somewhere in the middle. What we're looking at is that we're trying to focus on those areas where it's been among the driest or among the wettest. And where areas in between don't fall within those categories, so we don't kind of focus on them. We're trying to, to remove the noise from that ranking to find those extremes. So it's not in the extreme category, the white areas.
Thanks, Tamuka. Tamuka, I don't think there are any questions, but just concluding this presentation and the fact that we would have to compile key messaging and we all have to be on the same page. What would you say are the main countries and areas of concern for us going forward into the next few months of the region of the year? Also bearing in mind, it is going to be the post-harvest season. Things are supposed to be quite positive for us. We're supposed to see, an alleviation in food insecurity. What would you say, if you had to sum up, would be the main areas of concern that we would need to monitor from an early warning perspective going into the post-harvest season?
Yeah, I think the areas that are partly already shown on this map, especially in terms of the low area. So we've got Angola, Namibia, probably northern Botswana. I think those areas are quite clear, as well as northern Madagascar. In terms of the dryness, those are quite clear. And then in terms of, but I want to put a caveat to that, to say that assessments are currently ongoing. So I think there's a need for us to liaise with our national counterparts, the vulnerability assessment, the ministries of agriculture, so that we ensure that, because I think they are actually undertaking assessments at the moment. We also have the flood impacted areas, which include Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique, and Madagascar, right? So I think those are quite clear. But in terms of the precise impacts of the assessments, I think we need to make sure that we are collaborating both with the SADC Secretariat. So just to add that we're currently in the stages of finalizing the SADC agreement update. We work with the SADC colleagues in that. So I think it would be good to incorporate your inputs on that, or also, because I think that also kind of summarizes those. So that's what I would say in terms of the areas kind of at the top of my head, but we know that we do have some documentation, which is process currently ongoing to ensure that, we not those areas. So I think just emphasizing that need to liaise with both the countries and the SADC region. Over.
Thanks. Points well noted. And this is also a message, just reinforcing Tamuka's message that once you have the latest crop and livestock assessments, if you've managed to get this from the Ministry of Agriculture or you've been part of the assessments, please send them through. I think it's very important to take stock of how the season will unfold in terms of the harvests. Because most of the information we have, honestly, is really becoming rapidly outdated. So we really need to keep the information flow coming in so we can provide relevant analysis for members. On that note, and as Tamuka requested, we do have, an analysis done by the Data and Emergencies team on the impacts of flooding in Mozambique, Madagascar, and I think Malawi would be beginning soon or in process, but we will be sharing that information. Some of it are not in these slides. We've just included Malawi for relevance sake, but we will include the analysis done for Mozambique and Madagascar before we circulate it. On that note, I'm handing over to our co-chair, Godfrey, to start off the food security presentation today. Thanks, Godfrey.
Thanks, everyone. We just are going to do an overview of the regional food security in Southern Africa. I'm just going to do just the overview, and then my colleagues will take us through the details. And just we know we have just had the SADC Arafat meeting, which kind of tried to compile the number of food insecure in the region based on the back assessments. And just also to put a caveat, the number looks big, obviously, because it also includes South Africa, and we know the dynamics of South Africa food insecurity. So based on the SADC figures, it's about 57.8 million that are indicated as food insecure, which is a 7% increase to the 2021 to 2022, and a 39.9 increase when compared to 5-year average. But just so we contextualize these figures, there's a huge chunk of food insecure population for South Africa, which for programming purposes may mean a different story, obviously, because of the dynamics of South Africa. And then I think another huge chunk of that is coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and we also know the challenges that are associated with DRC because of conflict and also issues around information. And so those are the two countries with the biggest chunk of the number of food insecure populations that you see there. So we all know if we are to situate our problem at the moment, we know that we are at the very peak end of the rain season, and it's usually associated with an increase in the number of food insecure populations, obviously, because a number of households will have exhausted their own production. And I think for last year, we saw a number of countries households exhausting their own produced staple. For countries like Madagascar, looking at the southern portion of the country, we also saw the same for southern parts of Zimbabwe. The same applies to southern Malawi. In those areas, it was quite visible. There was an earlier than usual depletion of own-produced staple. So in the peak clean season, then that means that we have the increase of number of people that are facing significant levels of food insecurity in the IPC category. Plus, I guess in some areas like Madagascar, you will definitely see some level of indication of some IPC phase 4 outcomes as well. So the highest number of food insecure people, you find them in Angola, DRC, Madagascar, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. And of course, in the northern portions of Cabo Delgado in Mozambique, where conflict has created some serious issues. Even this year, I guess there were a lot of concerns about the ability of those households to plant and do any meaningful agriculture. So what we see here is a vicious cycle where the conflict comes about and then the season starts and there's no activity that takes place there because of that conflict. So you notice that Cabo Delgado, that area is not, under normal circumstances, it's usually supposed to be self-sufficient, but because of the conflict, it's keeping on the radar. And then let's also look at some of the issues that the region is facing. When we're talking about food insecurity, it was mainly linked to the kind of drought conditions that we experienced during the 2021-2022 season. But now looking at this current season, we have had issues that are, as much as the region, Tamuka has just given an overview of how the rainfall has performed. There were some areas where we had good rains. For instance, the southeastern portion of the region had good rainfall performance, whereas the western side, which covers Namibia, Botswana, and parts of Angola, it was a problem. But then what then complicated things is the dry spells that were experienced. I see there it's saying in December, but also we've also noticed that there were some significant dry spells around January. And that was quite devastating for places like southern Mozambique, parts of southern Madagascar, and also we've talked about Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. Those areas were significantly affected by those dry spells. And then we also have some areas where the actual rainfall performance was below average. And we see that in southeastern Angola, that portion which is always problematic remains a problem. And the argument for that place is, even in a good season, there are always going to be some problem, which then points to it's a chronic problem in that section of the country. And I guess the earlier we kind of start thinking about how that can be handled, because it's always going to be a problem. So we've also had serious challenges to do with flooding, some of it which was related to cyclones. We all know how Cyclone Cheneso in January ended up affecting some parts of Madagascar. And then we have also seen, I think Fred has been more devastating, especially in Malawi, Mozambique, and also parts of Madagascar. And of late, we've also seen some increase in flooding activities in places like Zambia and also Namibia. So I think those are some of the things that have actually challenged the region. So to just sum up on some of the key drivers that are causing problems of food insecurity in the region, we definitely have drought and the drought and also those dry spells. We have flooding that is linked to cyclones. We also have economic issues in some countries like Zimbabwe and also even Madagascar. I think the inflation still hovers around 11.4%. That's quite big. We also have the residual impacts of the Russo-Ukrainian conflict, which is creating some problems. Sometimes it's manifesting in the prices of fuel. And just in this agricultural season, we've also seen prices of fertilizers also being a problem. So that's a new thing. Then conflict in DRC and Mozambique remains one of the tropical issues that is creating increases in food insecurity. So I think in general, these are some of the drivers that are causing problems as far as food insecurity is concerned. I will hand over to my colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Godfrey. Okay, thanks for that regional overview. We wanted to just highlight quickly some of the areas of concern, as we usually have as FNSWG, based on the past trend of food insecurity, coupled with the recent hazards that we have seen that could deteriorate food insecurity even further in the coming weeks and months, possibly. So we wanted to quickly zone in on Malawi and Mozambique. I will talk to Malawi quickly. I think most of you know this information. There's nothing unusual in this information. The fact that we've already had 3.8 million people food insecure in the country, this was more than double the estimate for the January to March period. And the key drivers, extremely high food prices and fuel prices in the country, currency depreciation, coupled with weather-induced localized shortfalls in production in 2022, are one of the main primary factors that have underpinned the increase. We've also seen excessive rainfall, particularly in the south. Godfrey talked to this, Tamuka talked to the incessant rains, with Blantyre bearing the brunt of this impact. And as of 20th March, over 508,000 people who were displaced. We wanted to give you this context just to show you the next slide. This is some of the information we've got from the rapid assessments to show the impact on agriculture, particularly for Malawi. As we said, we have information from the data and emergencies team for Mozambique and Madagascar, but because it has been presented previously, we didn't include here, but Angela's on standby to talk to that in a moment. What we wanted to just draw your attention to was that there's been significant impacts on agriculture. This is particularly damage that was done by Tropical Cyclone Freddy, but we all know that there were previous impacts from the other flooding and rainfall, heavy rains that have affected the country. 12 districts seriously affected in terms of agriculture. If you just look at the extreme column on the left, it's almost 120,000 hectares of crops that have been washed away, around 85,000 hectares of crops that have been submerged, and a total of 205,000 hectares of crops that have been affected. This includes, if you look at livestock, almost 195,000 livestock deaths, almost 90,000 livestock that have been injured, and around 286,000 livestock that have been affected. Fisheries has also been affected, doesn't exclude fisheries, and a significant number of farming households that have been affected by the heavy flooding and the cyclone. So this just draws your attention to the fact that we may see Malawi continuing to be on our radar from an early warning perspective, requiring close monitoring. We are working closely with the country office to get the latest assessments, the agriculture assessments, including the crop and livestock assessment. And once that information becomes available, we will send it through to our partners. So this is Malawi. And in terms of Mozambique, the IPC team is going to come in to talk to the IPC analysis, but this is just talking to the fact that there has been considerable impacts also in Malawi, particularly during the harvesting of maize and while preparing for the rice harvest when Cyclone Freddy hit. And according to the National Institute for Disaster Management, over 66,000 hectares of agricultural land have been affected. If we look at the analysis done by the data and emergencies team, we were given a figure of 100,000, so over 100,000 hectares of agricultural land that have actually been affected by Tropical Storm Freddy or Cyclone Freddy. And it's worth noting that with climate variability, a year's worth of rain was actually dumped in Mozambique over this past month. Before we move on to IPC, I just want to ask Angela, if she's online, to just come in and give a quick update on the data and emergencies assessment and figures that she's willing to quickly share with us while we're on this topic. Angela, are you online?
Thanks, Q. Yes, I am. In terms of figures, I think we'll just share the final documents that were created, but it's basically under rapid geospatial analysis, which we conducted as data and emergencies, and was provided to the countries so that they can use those to go in ground truth. So with those will be updated, of course, after the field assessments that they are currently conducting in both Mozambique and Madagascar. And for Malawi, we will be sharing as well once it's complete, and they will use it for rapid assessments. It basically just shows the likely impact on cropland affected, flood extent. And I think soon after this meeting, SIPO can share the final documents. But just to say that for yeah, like you said, for Malawi, the crop assessments will be ongoing, but also a post-disaster needs assessment will be happening as requested by the government. And it's likely to, so that we can have a quantification of the damage and losses in all sectors. And FAO will be part of the agriculture sector to conduct that in the next few weeks. And we'll be sharing once those results are finalized through the government, of course, both of them.
Thank you. Thanks, Angela, for that. We will await the final reports and we will send it to members once they come in. There's a question from Beth Simons for Malawi. With the hectares of crops damaged, what is the damage as a percentage of total? Okay, we would send you that. We are noting that, Beth, and we will do that estimate for you and send it through as an action point from our side. Are there any questions before we hand over, Talent?
Yes, thank you, Q. Just a quick question on the percentage change in the food insecure population. I think those 2 slides back.
Mm-hmm.
The table, yes. I realized there was a significant, I don't know how to interpret the -68 for Namibia, where there's an improvement, and then also the percentage change for Angola and the Swatini, given everything that has been discussed this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, one would expect, a positive percentage change in case it implies an increase in the number of food insecure populations. But here I see a very significant improvement if that is how the data is meant to be interpreted, in which case then I would ask, what is it that Namibia is doing, that Angola is doing, that the other countries are not doing, if this is an improvement?
Thanks, Talent. I think that question, because those numbers are IPC, I will try to come in.
I think you are the chair here. Don't say these are it's a food insecurity. Exposing. But anyway, it's a very good question. And I always say this table has to have a caveat. We always say, let's put a statement. Because you see, when you look at Mozambique, it says 125% change, which is not true. What basically they are saying, they had a big analysis. They expanded on the areas that they analyzed. They expanded on the people that they are reporting on food insecurity. So it's not necessarily an increase in food insecurity. So we need to put a caveat there. With regards to Angola previously had also a huge area number of units of analysis. This time around, they reduced the number of analyzed areas. So it's not to say they improved, no. But of course, if you look at the previous season, that's when they had the highest, the most severe drought in 40 years. That's why I was asking Tamuka, how does it? So in terms of all these are projections. And we expect to then do, when they do the countries update their analysis in the coming months, we see the changes. When the season started, a number of countries were looking at a positive, normal to above normal season. Look at Namibia. Namibia was saying they're coming from a lockdown, they're changing. Of course, they're not rely mostly on cropping. They are purchase-based country. But nonetheless, they do have livestock and they do have small grains. And they were saying, no, with the season, we expect also our crops, our livestock to be better, to fetch better prices. We're exposed in terms of the northern parts of Namibia, where there's a lot of tourism, they expect also to have activities. So that's why that improvement happened. But if you look at information that is coming out of the country right now, acute malnutrition, I'm not sure whether Major is online, but acute malnutrition is a cause of concern. It is increasing, it is in terms of admissions of severe acute malnutrition. So we need to put a caveat there to say the numbers do not necessarily, because you see, when someone says 122% change, people think, it's bad. And yet it's the number of people that are being reported in terms of food insecurity.
Okay, guys, we really need to wrap this one up. And thanks for that message, Talent, and for the information, Kudzai. Sipo, let's move to the next slides that we have on this. We're running.
I have a question. Sorry, no, quick one, if I just remember the table that you had.
I think
sorry.
the table is a bit contentious. We would need to just relook at some of the things.
Not the table livestock.
Oh, livestock.
Yes, this one. I wanted to understand which type of livestock, because there's a bearing in terms of the stocking, in terms of what.
Okay.
So I think it would be good to
We will
separate
get
small
that.
stock and.
Okay.
Yeah.
We will get that information from the country office.
Okay.
Right, thanks for that. Okay, we were supposed to hand over to the IPC team for the Mozambique.
I thought we were separate. Anyway, thanks, Q. Just to note that, we have been waiting for a long time for the results. The analysis was done last year in November, and the country took long to release the results. It became political at some point. We had to meet up with the minister and discuss, but we're happy that the results have been released. And we're happy that the country has covered the whole country, except for a few areas that are not accessible. And, when you look at northern Mozambique, Cabo Delgado, this is a projection that was done last in April, but we needed to report on it. And though we did not have, time to update it, but I think I'll hand over to Simon.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. I think basically we just have this one slide because in the previous meeting we had given quite coverage for the other countries. This was the only the Mozambique and Angola were the ones that were remaining. But again, you see Angola, we are not yet there. Though we get signals like they have released, the information is there. That's what we got from the meeting last SADC meeting. But we just narrowed down to Mozambique, like Zaya has mentioned. This analysis was done in November. In November, I was there. And even after we finished the analysis, it has taken a long time because of the dynamics in the country on issues that the country would like to see and what government would like to have and partners and so on. But we are glad that finally they did that. But so in a summary, the report, what we have is a combination of the analysis that was done for 150 districts. And initially, there was the analysis for Cabo Delgado, which was done in June. And so these results combines the projected period for the Cabo Delgado, whose projection was November to March. That was their projection. And for the other districts, their current was November to March. So the country agreed just to tie the two for Cabo Delgado projection and for the other district current because it's the same time frame. And so the results, as they indicate here, 3.15 million people, which represents 10% of the analyzed population in the country, were classified in IPC phase 3 or above. And specifically for those in IPC phase 3, it's at 2.75 million and about 398,000 in IPC phase 4. So those areas that were classified in phase 3, 32 areas of those, the total number of districts in phase 3 were actually in phase 3, and then plus another additional three areas that are in Cabo Delgado. So in total, when you look at the map, you will see in the Cabo Delgado, there are areas that are in phase 3, and then you have these are the bulk of the other total 34 areas that were actually classified in IPC phase 3. I think a lot of issues have already been raised in the previous discussions. And what we would just want to highlight here is that even as we're coming towards the end of this season that we are looking at, November to March, remember today is just 28th, which is just 3 days away to April. So you look at what has happened during that period of time, the cyclones and the strong winds that Mozambique has had to bear. If you look at what also Tamuka mentioned and also what Godfrey did mention, there are areas that they would receive a lot of rain. Then after some time, a dry spell comes in, and so that affects crops. So there are a number of districts where crops did not do very well because of the irregular way in which the rain pattern was occurring. And then, of course, we had, we still have high food prices driven by completely myriad of different other factors, including the global issues that are affecting transportation issues, fertilizer prices, things like that are generally pushing food prices high. Conflict issues in Cabo Delgado, and I think many teams have been going up there to just make sure that they're able to collect the right information. We also just wanted to highlight that the impact of this cyclone Freddy now, which has happened in this recent past, is not really factored into this, because I think that is something that is going to come later, because this analysis was done in November, reflecting what had happened within that year. So again, later on, when now this other analysis is done, by the way, they're also planning a post-shock assessment anytime soon, and I think that is what will also bring out the information in terms of now what exactly is the impact of this tropical storm on Mozambique in general. So in a nutshell, Q, we just wanted from our end to highlight this as regards Mozambique.
Thank you so much, Simon and Kudzai.
Yes,
Are they?
behind. I'm seeing a heavy jacket being produced in summer when it was supposed to be relevant and shiny during winter. When I look at this thing here, and I don't know, I know Kudzai and whatever you raised during the SADC meeting and so forth, but I don't know how we can use our influence as different agencies operating in this country. I think continuation of this kind of behavior will throw us in some kind of a very uncomfortable position. They are giving us this information now. For what utility? The situation has completely changed. We've had those cyclones that have totally changed the outlook, and then now they're giving us this. It's not going to be helpful for anyone unless we are historians. This is the archives, to be honest. Very good information, very useful information, but that is just coming at the wrong time. So I don't know how we can probably try to think how we can. I know SADC, we can use the route of SADC, but we also know the limitations. But perhaps for organizations that have stronger voice and some who also put their money in this process, I don't know how we can leverage on this and make sure that at least we get this information at a useful time. Because this is supposed to be for decision making, but as is, this is some very good history. So I don't know how that can happen, but I guess we definitely need to push. It was very actually saddening to see how Angola actually nearly come up in arms with the FNSWG asking, where did you get this information? Because where they published the IPC, whatever, and they are actually proud that at least we've done something, so they are proud that to even say that statement. So I don't know how this, I fear that this may also kill the prospects of our IPC in the region if we continue having this kind of a trend.
Yeah. I share your statements, Godfrey. Just to note, maybe for information, we have agreed to have, we're not in Angola and Mozambique, it's mostly a political issue. And we have raised it with the highest office, and we have agreed to have a strategic mission to both Angola and Mozambique to meet with the ministers, explain the utility, like you put it. It's pointless to have a report and then fail to use it, and the need for approval versus endorsement. So I think we'll let the group know once the dates have been set for those strategic missions.
Thank you. Thanks for that relevant point, Godfrey, and Kudzai for the clarification. I think what we're seeing, it's not just with the IPC, but you'll also see if SIPO moves ahead with the slides, the crop prospect information that we have received from the latest JUICE report that was put together from, remote sensing vegetative indicators. also this becomes rapidly outdated as well in light of the recent hazards that we have seen. So I think this is the point I want to state over and over again, that what the information that we are providing, particularly on the outlook in terms of cereal production, in terms of the harvesting, in terms of the numbers of food insecure in the different countries that we are seeing, even our hotspot countries that we need to watch. That information is continually in flux because we haven't received the most recent up-to-date crop and livestock assessments yet. And a lot of these hazard information that we have seen haven't been factored into the analysis, the IPC analysis or other food security analysis that we have access to at this moment. So even this, we are quite hesitant to present this. It may not, I would say it is quite outdated. According to the JEWS report, just one statement I'm going to emphasize, depicted a near average situation across most parts of the region. Okay, according to JEWS, near average harvest, most likely in all countries in Southern Africa. But as we have seen, there could be serious hotspots where we could see below average production, like Tamuka highlighted, Southern Angola, Southern Zimbabwe, large parts of Southern Malawi that are also key producing areas. I think the central and some parts of the south, and Botswana, including Botswana and central parts of South Africa. So I know South Africa released the crop estimates just a few days ago, also pointing to quite a positive picture. But then again, we need to factor in some of these heavy rainfall, the impacts of the heavy rainfall and possible waterlogging in the next estimate that would probably be issued. The hazards may be factored in there, the impacts may be factored in there. But just stressing that, yeah, we need constant new information coming in so we can keep all of us updated and have relevant information on what the season is going to look like.
Before you move on from Mozambique, so FAO will also be sharing a recent study on land use and access for IDPs and host communities in Cabo Delgado. It's covering Nampula. It's covering Nampula from the 1st to the 21st of March. It's supposed to be released today. So I'll share that as well.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, I think we have exhausted that session on the food security update, and we are now moving into nutrition. Godfrey?
Okay, thanks, Q, for taking us through all this. We are going to leave this time to our new nutrition colleagues, UNICEF, WFP. I guess this Marjorie who is presenting, right? Over to you, Marjorie.
No, I think, hi, good morning. I think it should be Irene. Irene, are you online?
Yes, I'm online.
Okay, over to you, Irene.
Okay. Tamuka had his hand up. Tamuka, do you want to come in before I come?
Thank you, Irene. Yeah, so I just wanted to contribute to the issue of how best we can, bring together the different information sources and continuous updates. And I wanted to mention the issue of the GeoGlam crop monitor for early warning that we participate in. This is a report that is updated once a month, and it's actually multi-agency, I think, including participation from FAO, WFP are part of that, EC, the GRC Joint Research Commission for the European Union. And I think the idea of this is for all the agencies that are involved in crop assessments or monitoring crop production to participate in. So I just wanted to invite, I think, everyone on the FNSWG to maybe actively participate in that, because we all have different sources of information. But this will help us to all come to a common picture in terms of the assessments, also inviting the national colleagues as well. That's what I wanted to share. Over.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. And good morning once again. I'll present the nutrition bit on behalf of WFP, UNICEF, and our cooperating partners. So just to highlight what Tamuka was saying, I was in Angola a few weeks ago, And the pictures of the crops that Tamuka presented are exactly the situation in Angola. So we are looking at a situation where they'll have a poor harvest. And yes, just to confirm, it's a very dry season for the southern part of that country. We also have the tropical cyclones affecting Madagascar, Malawi, and Mozambique, and the floods that followed thereafter, which will negatively impact the agricultural season, as indicated by other colleagues, and that will definitely have a negative impact on the nutrition situation. So we are looking at a situation where we already have IPC figures that we think will increase following the assessments that are currently going on. If assistance is not scaled up for these locations, the nutritional status will deteriorate. So we'll look at a few countries. We'll look at 4 or 5 countries instead, which are worse in terms of the emergency situation in those countries that we have both UNICEF and WFP supporting nutrition activities. I'll start with Angola. As you have already said, there is the protracted crisis in terms of the drought, and the situation is not getting any better. We are looking at a situation where the funding is very limited and it's short term, which affects nutrition programming in the country. We have UNICEF and WFP operating in 6 provinces, that is UNICEF for some treatment, and WFP is in 4 provinces of the country, providing treatment and prevention of moderate acute malnutrition. I will not go through the details of the figures. The slides will be shared and people can go through the figures. But yeah, what I can say, go back to the Angola slide. Yes, thank you. We also plan to have, that is UNICEF, to have a smart survey for Huila province in the coming months. So one of the major challenges with Angola is the approval of assessments. Like the IPC team mentioned, the IPC for last year has not been approved. A couple of smart surveys that we also conducted have not been approved. So for us to really predict or to tell the situation as you see it on ground is a bit difficult because there is no evidence base for you to have that. So it's a big challenge for Angola, which we need maybe colleagues in the country office together with us to engage more and further with the government to have these assessments approved. Over to Malawi. Malawi is currently facing floods from the tropical storm Freddy. It was also hit by cholera, and already they were battling a polio outbreak. So all these issues and the crops that were almost ready have been basically washed away by the floods. We expect the nutrition situation to deteriorate. Already over 500,000 people have been displaced by the flooding. Before, it was projected that 213,000 children will be wasted. But this is likely to increase because of the displacements and all the other hazards that they are facing. UNICEF deployed staff to support in the as support for the Freddy response. These staff were deployed at national and district level to strengthen the nutrition cluster coordination response for Freddy. 5 assessments have already taken place pertaining to this cyclone. We are also providing treatment and prevention of severe acute malnutrition and moderate acute malnutrition. But looking at the situation and the funding for SAM and MAM treatment in the country, which is usually very low, we are expecting that this will go up, the malnutrition cases. So the service of malnutrition treatment needs to scale up. Then to Madagascar, the hazards, they're the same, but of late they have increased. So we have the drought that has been ongoing for years. We also have the cyclones that continue coming back. And to note, the nutrition situation has been deteriorating in Madagascar since last year, 2020. We have seen an increase in admission for both SAM and MAM cases. And the situation doesn't look the outlook doesn't look any good. So in terms of funding, it's also a challenge because they keep getting hit by hazards and prioritization of funds move to the emergency to stabilize things, which leaves nutrition in a dire situation, and scaling up sometimes it's very difficult. So yeah, we need to be advocating for more funding for Madagascar nutrition activities. UNICEF plans to do smart surveys in 11 districts in the south and 11 more districts in southeast. That is in the first quarter of this year. This should be around April as well. Then for Tropical Cyclone Freddy, WFP responded with hot meals in temporary shelters. They also provided high energy biscuits to displaced populations. That is just after the displacement, hot meals followed thereafter. And plans are in place to scale up food assistance, which is really important for the nutrition side, because this scale up will help prevent further deterioration of the nutritional status of the community. Over to the next one, that is Mozambique. So Mozambique, the insecurity situation, as highlighted by the previous speakers, continues to present with new displacement and an increase in humanitarian needs. We have almost 1 million people that were affected by the tropical cyclone, the latest one, Freddy, and cholera has also spread from Malawi into Mozambique, which all will affect the nutritional status of those communities. We'll go back to still on Mozambique, the updates, yes. UNICEF and WFP and the partners are operating in 3 provinces in the north, that is Cabo Delgado, providing treatment services and prevention for acute malnutrition. We have also scaled up our activities to cover the highly affected provinces affected by floods following Cyclone Freddy. The initial response for Cyclone Freddy for the nutrition side, nutrition screening happened at the time of compiling this report. It was still ongoing, and health and nutrition services were being provided through the already set up integrated mobile brigades that already provide services there. So we have scaled up the provision of RUTF and RUSF to the communities that have been affected. before Cyclone Freddy, Mozambique had put out a call to action for their 2023 HRP. They were requesting for 29 million, and this has not yet been fulfilled. Now, after Cyclone Freddy, the initial assessments show that they will require an additional of 1.3 million, and the PIN has actually increased from 500,000 to about 700,000 people in need for nutrition services. So just to call out on everyone on the platform that as we continue to advocate for funding, let's also continue to advocate for Mozambique to have these needs covered. Then the last one is Zimbabwe. So for Zimbabwe, last year, they had a number of smart surveys following their ZimVac. It was agreed that additional information was required. So they had a number of smart surveys in 7 districts, which showed a general increase in wasting, which is basically a situation that we see across the region. The nutrition situation in the region is actually worsening. So for Zimbabwe, the economic crisis, high inflation, and all the other macroeconomic challenges that the country faces doesn't make the situation any better. UNICEF is in the country supporting the treatment of severe acute malnutrition, and the country has a huge funding gap of 79% for their nutrition interventions. This year is not an easy year for the country as they'll have their elections this year. So some of the activities are already not easy to implement since it is an election year. I think those are the main. Oh, yes, there is DRC. So DRC being the last country to present, there is nothing major or new on DRC. The main problems are still the ones that the country is facing. The conflict still drives the biggest driver for food insecurity and malnutrition. Currently, the conflict in the east has resulted in new displacement and access for humanitarian agencies to provide services in those locations is limited because of the conflict. UNICEF and WFP and their partners are there supporting nutrition interventions. And for WFP, we have the treatment and prevention of moderate acute malnutrition. We also support the prevention of chronic malnutrition and supporting caregivers that are enrolled in UNICEF-supported inpatient care with food while they're inpatient for the treatment of some. So that is basically all on the 5 emergency countries that we wanted to look at for this month. Over.
Thanks, Irene, for that detailed analysis that you provided about the nutrition state of nutrition in the region. For those of us who have been around for a long time, we all know how we struggled with nutrition information, but we are happy that there's been a positive evolution, which is helping us to at least get this kind of level of detail on nutrition. So thank you so much for that. And colleagues, I just want to check if there are any who have some questions. So Irene and team can help us. I see Haney, that's supposed to be 90. Okay, it's fine. Colleagues. Right, for those that are here in Sunning Hill, there are no questions. So I don't know, Sipo, are you seeing anyone online with some questions?
No hands.
There's no one. Okay. Seeing none, I allow me then to proceed to the next presentation, which is going to be some joint work of WFP and FuseNet on an update on market prices and markets. So I don't know, is it Virginia or Jones who is presenting? Jones. Okay, go ahead, Jones.
Thank you, Godfrey. Good morning once again, colleagues. I'll share the presentation of the price and markets updates on behalf of my colleagues. Next slide, please. I think the first slide would like to just give us some context on what is happening at the global level with regard to the food price index. The index, if you look at the extreme left chart for 2022 and 23, has continued declining, the 11th consecutive monthly decline. It's 8% below its value in February 2022, and also 18.7% from its peak in March 2022. So really positive news at the global level in terms of stability in food prices. The other chart in the middle shows the various sub-indices focus on the cereal and the vegetable oil, which has been marginally increased in the January to February period. But wheat, maize, and rice have generally been stable, which is important for our region. We are an importer for wheat as well as rice. I think a lot is thanks to the extension of the Black Sea Grain Export Initiative that has helped to calm down markets. The vegetable oil index is also down thanks to abundant export availability and low demand, global demand for oil. Next slide, please. So globally, yes, prices are quite stable, but in our region, when we look at the grain price trends for January to February, we see the typical seasonal increases in countries such as Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Malawi. I think there was mention earlier about the food prices in Malawi. You can see measured on the left y-axis, those blue columns. Malawi month-on-month prices for grain increased by 25%, which is quite phenomenal. But this is the peak hunger season, as mentioned earlier. So we expect these increases. We have had some stability in the spot prices for white and yellow maize in South Africa, as well as Maputo. These two markets are linked. Maputo maize is largely supplied by imports from South Africa. So you see the correlation there between Randfontein, white prices, and Maputo price movements as well. In terms of annual trends, yes, strong increases year on year. These are now measured on that top chart on the secondary y-axis on the right-hand side and measured by those orange dots. The majority of the countries, 15% and above, increases year on year, largely because of depreciation in currencies and the high cost of production. I think this was mentioned earlier. Now, when you look at the parity comparison of prices, February average prices across these reference markets, again, the spot prices in Randfontein for white and yellow maize are among the lowest, including Lusaka prices. They are among the lowest in the region, a reflection of still available volumes for export. Zambia is exporting. Volumes have started decreasing though, and it still operates the quota export policy. We are aware South Africa has started exporting some of its maize to Kenya, which market that Zambia has been trying to supply. But yes, we increasingly see Kenya land imports from South Africa, given logistical advantages compared to the inland imports from Zambia via Tanzania and also via Malawi. We still see significant export, cross-border export activity between Zambia and Malawi, as well as between Malawi and Tanzania. This is largely driven by the strong import demand in East Africa. These volumes are still flowing towards the eastern part of Africa. Next slide, please. This slide, again, to give you some updates on the cost of fuel, in this case, diesel. We have a few reference markets. And in terms of monthly price movements, we've seen stability in Malawi, Maputo, and Goma. There was no movement at all, month on month. But we've seen movement in Lusaka, Harare, and South Africa, largely because of depreciating domestic currencies. We are aware that global crude oil prices have softened in the last 3-4 months, which is good for cost of transportation. But you know, weakening domestic currencies makes it difficult to manage further increases. In terms of annual trends for diesel in these markets, very strong increases year on year, particularly in Malawi. These are now measured by those orange dots using the right y-axis, above 40% in Malawi, Maputo, and Zambia. And we know transport costs is a major contributor to the transport sub-inflation index, which is currently elevated. And the chart below shares just a parity comparison of these markets and shows most of the inland markets, the prices are much higher than those countries with coast or port access. Next slide, please. This last slide just gives you a feel of the macroeconomic trends, measuring particularly inflation and interest rates. I've decided to rank these countries by the magnitude of the month-on-month inflation rate. So our role model is Tanzania, with the lowest headline inflation, under 5%. Also, the lowest, not the lowest, but relatively low food inflation of 9.6%, and less pressure on or price momentum on inflation movement. Interest rates in Tanzania are among the lowest. We are aware that the Feds increased the policy rate by 25 points, and the EU also did the same. So we are expecting the policy authorities in our countries to also make similar adjustments in terms of increasing interest rates to fight the inflation pressures. Fortunately for some countries such as Tanzania, there are indications that they won't make an adjustment. Angola, just a few days ago, did reduce the interest rates by 100 points. So the current interest rate is 16%, not 17. It's now for March going forward 16%. Zimbabwe did reduce earlier, but the interest rate remains very high. But one of the key points, colleagues, the key takeaways is, yes, we were observing headline inflation levels kind of tapering or peaking these last 2 months, but they've started increasing. And you can see from the month-on-month rates, countries such as Madagascar, DRC, Zambia are on the back foot. And we could see the monetary authorities in these countries increase their policy rates. Food inflation is still peaking. As you are aware, we are right at the peak of the hunger season. So food prices remains high. And yes, with the harvest coming, we could see some tapering in food inflation rates, which could help lower the headline inflation levels. Thank you, colleagues.
Thanks, Jones, and your team for this detailed update on price and market. I guess we all know how in a number of places, especially during this lean season, how prices kind of drive food insecurity. Obviously, there is high reliance on market purchases at a time when most of the unproduced products have been depleted. So I think this is a very important parameter that we need to keep on monitoring. So I just want to find out if we have any questions, starting from those that are here, and then we move on to the colleagues that are online.
Just two quick ones. First one, I think there was a slide on commodity prices. If I'm not mistaken, I think we're talking about diesel. And there's a mixture of countries and cities. I don't know how we reconcile those two in terms of whatever number we're seeing.
Okay, Jones.
That's one. Okay, maybe you want to take the second one?
Maybe I can just, you can just provide all two.
Okay, then the second one, I think following what you've just outlined, markets are a key player in urban food security. If I relate to the the other presentation on the food security numbers, where we're talking 58 million, I believe those are largely rural population numbers. How will this then impact on two sides? Okay, the rural side and the side, the numbers that you explained. Okay. Jones.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Just to clarify that, yes, in the diesel prices that we are monitoring in some countries are national averages. So you see countries in the label. But there are some cases where we are able to monitor specific markets within countries, and we show the specific markets. So yeah, I could have made clarified a little bit, on that. So where we have countries, those are national averages, and market specific price trends are also shown. Indeed, we are showing a lot of the reference markets in urban markets, and we know there are linkages between these urban and rural markets. So we use the urban markets as the reference markets. That's where a lot of the aggregation is done. And they are key in terms of that's where the major consumption markets are. So in terms of vulnerability, we are likely to see more numbers given the populations in those reference markets. Over. Thank you.
Karim. Yeah, George, I'm just thinking aloud. When you look at, I was fortunate enough to be in Angola last year in October. And I'm just thinking, I've been to a number of countries in the region, and the prices of food in Angola is quite high. But here, I know, when you look at inflation, you're looking at the changes in terms of the price. Would it give us more information if we compare the actual prices to see the levels of price? Because I know in Angola, it's very expensive for a meal, and it excludes a lot of people. Though the inflation is very low, people might just say inflation is very low and assume it's affordable to everyone. I am just thinking how best we can use that actual price and looking at inflation and try to marry the two. Because that chart of Angola, it will look very positive, and yet I know quite a lot of people cannot afford the meals because they are quite high, but they are stable. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Indeed, like other speakers have mentioned, Angola is a tough terrain when it comes to accessing market product prices. Data is being collected, but it's not being shared. So we don't have access to any market product prices for Angola. But I hear you. The indications from inflation don't reflect what is happening in terms of the actual market prices. What we have simply been able to show is over the last few months, say 12 months or so, prices have really come down thanks to the appreciation of the Kwanza. So imported inflation has come down. Angola imports quite a lot of food. So the strengthening of the Kwanza has helped to moderate imported inflation. But yes, I take note, the price levels in markets are quite high relative to other markets in the region. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jones. And in the best interest of our time, allow me to the next item, which is on the work plan. All of us know that we had a historic work planning session. I call it historic in the sense that IPC and FNSWG managed for the first time to come up with a joint product reflective of our interest in improving technical analysis related to food insecurity in the region. You mandated us to proceed more like refining the work plan, and we've been doing that. So at this point in time, there are a few gaps that still exist, and I just want to request that all our team leaders, and remember we had 4 pillars that we were grappling with. We had the resilience, food security, nutrition, and DRR. So all the team leaders, we are kindly requesting you to get into the system and help us address some of the gaps that still exist. That doesn't mean that you're doing it alone. You just probably coordinating with some of the key members of that you work with on the same pillar. So we just want to, there are a few gaps that are still existing. So we want to close this chapter and make sure that we leave a clean document to the next regime that is taking over in May and in August. So if you could help us team leaders to just make sure that you get into the system and check on the gaps that exist for, I think she's just
actually just 3 activities.
3 activities.
Yes.
All right. So I would like to encourage you to also chat with
They can
people.
also maybe double check the timing that is on there under each pillar, just to make sure it's according to what we agreed on before we finalize and make it look a bit
Nice.
better.
Okay.
But I remember there is a pillar. Did we complete it?
Yes.
Yeah.
We know it was resilience.
Resilience.
Yeah.
We managed.
I didn't see the copy, unfortunately.
I think for purposes of ensuring that we understand what's in this document, because it's going to bind us, as in like for the next couple of months, we are going to be
it's one of
bound by that document. We all need to read and see if the editing team incorporated all the things that you wanted to be in that document.
Yeah.
So if we can all have a look, I know usually once we're done with this process, we hardly then revisit, but we just want to make sure that whatever is in the document is reflective of what we, the kind of issues that we highlighted during the work planning session. So just a quick reminder, if you can do it this week, and make sure that by the time we go for Easter, that is done, I think that would be great. And again, before I hand over this time to Q, I just want to encourage us to, we know that we have elections that are coming up for the co-chairmanship of the, not chairmanship, because that's not gender. Yeah. I don't want to start trouble here. Yes, for the chair of the NGO side, or rather non-UN side of the working group, which is going to be come vacant after FUSENET's term is coming to an end in May. So we started announcing in February. We are supposed to, by way of going back to our TORs and constitution, we are supposed to say this for 3 months, and we've done just that. So we want to, I know that there could be some campaigns that are taking place already, but I just want to encourage those organizations that are vying for this to hand over the names to SIPO as soon as possible, because, and that also includes the profile of the person who that you are seconding to take over. So if you can supply that information to SIPO, that will work out. And for those that were not part of the meeting, just to also announce that there are some changes in the way we are going to be voting. After realizing that some in the past voters to come and vote, this time around it's one person per organization. So guys, don't ask anyone. We're just going to be having one person per organization to be voting, and you need to be a member, not an observer, for you to be participating in these elections. So let's gear up for the elections that are coming up, so that we get somebody who will take us over, who will get over this vision to the next level. So I'll hand over this time to Q.
Thank you. So my job today is to do the closing. And on that interesting note, I'd like to thank you all for your contributions and for your participation. And before we officially close, I'd just like to ask Vanessa if she has any closing comments for us today as our special guest.
Thank you, Q. And yeah, thank you everyone for just welcoming me into this group and an opportunity to observe your partnerships and how you work together. As I mentioned earlier, I am based in DC with FNSWG. I've been with FNSWG now for about 8 years. And I know you are all very familiar with Godfrey, who really works as the senior management of our region and has been overseeing it for some time. But this has been my first opportunity to travel down and meet Godfrey and interact with our partnerships in person. So it's been a real pleasure so far. We'll be moving across the region, headed to Madagascar next week. And I think that one of the things that I've really been looking forward to in coming to Southern Africa is that across FNSWG's regions, this is just really known as a region where the partnerships are particularly strong. And that has been something that's been really valuable to us across FNSWG's time in Southern Africa, is just the way in which information is shared, the way in which partners get together to collaborate on the analysis, and the way in which even when there are differences across the analysis, that is always discussed in a really respectful manner, with an idea that everyone would like to reach a convergence and be able to determine where everyone is coming from in their analyses. And so I just really want to thank you for all of the partnerships, the information sharing, and the collaboration with FNSWG. It's been immensely appreciated, and we look forward to more of it in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Until the next meeting. All the best. Have a good day.
Thank you. Russia. Bye, colleagues.
Thanks.
Thank you. Nice day. Bye-bye.